welcome everybody to back to a second session of today. we have we had such a wonderful presentation in the last session. We just kept going. It was all of that and more. So today we have with us our student is welcome. We want to welcome Hafiz Farooq. He is, I hope I pronounced that right, Hafiz. I know I got the Hafiz right, but he is Dr. Warren. He hails from Pakistan. He's an exchange student, and he's in our bioethics honors program. Dr. Rhonda Collier introduced me to him over the summer, and we worked nonstop to make sure he arrived safely. Since he's got here, he's been trying to be as active as he could be. He was a part of the Healthy Halloween Harvest Festival, and now he's part of the Public Health Ethics Intensive. Mr. Farooq is from a senior student in chemical engineering at University of Engineering and Technology in Lahore, Pakistan. He is currently an exchange student with Tuskegee University for the fall of 2021 semester on a global UGrad Pakistan program, which is sponsored by the United States Department of State in collaboration with IREX and USEFP. He is also, again, one of our bioethics honors students. Welcome, Hafiz. We appreciate your presence here. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much, Dr. Coach, for giving your words.
Very good. See, and I can speak in the native tongue. We can speak in the tongue. Are you Muslim?
Yes.
Okay,
I am Muslim.
Exactly. Yes. We could go in every direction. So now, Hafiz, I'm going to turn it over to you and to introduce to us Judge Deborah Biggers. And so the floor is yours. And then after she speaks, and then you will introduce to us Attorney Charlene Bryant. Take it away, Brother Farooq.
Thank you. So I want to introduce our special guest for the second session, I'm going to introduce the speaker for the topic of justice or law. And for this session, our today's speaker is Honorable Deborah Hill Biggers, and she is currently serving as a district court judge for the Macon County District Court in Macon County, Alabama. And she was elected to the court on November 4th, 2014. And if we look at the education, so Biggers received her BA degree from Fisk University and her Juris Doctor degree from the Vanderbilt University. And about her career, so prior to the selection, prior to her election to the bench, Biggers worked as an attorney in private practice. So it was a brief introduction of our special guest speaker like Deborah Hill Biggers. And now I would like to give the session to our speaker, Deborah Hill Biggers, who will put the light on the topic of justice and law. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I know it is 3:15, but our bodies probably feel like it's 4:15 since we just began daylight saving time. So I am going to try to be energetic in this presentation to keep you all energized so you all will not go to sleep at this end of the day. First of all, I want to thank Tuskegee University for this invitation to serve as a presenter among all of the other distinguished presenters that I've heard, especially today. As the introducer said, I was requested to speak and focus my remarks on justice and law. Let's take the time out first to define what is justice? Justice is the use of power as appointed by law, honor, or standards to support fair treatment and due reward. Justice is simply moral rightness based on ethics, rationality, law, or equity. It's the act of being fair and just. Now let's look at the word law. The law is defined as the system of rules which a particular community recognizes as regulations to the actions of its members, and which may enforce by the imposition of penalties. Now, in my capacity as a general jurisdiction state court judge, I first must, of course, I have to know what the law is. Secondly, I must administer and apply the law fairly and equitably to the facts that are before me. Then I must render a just and fair result, whether that result is the award of monetary damages, if appropriate, in a civil case, or impose a penalty, such as jail time, probation, fine, or imposition of costs or restitution, if appropriate, in a criminal case. So in pondering how I was going to incorporate and discuss law and justice in this brief time that I have with you today, I have selected the following subtopic: shades of gray, balancing compassion and ethics with a Black letter law to achieve justice. I'm going to repeat that. Shades of gray, balancing compassion and ethics with a Black letter law to achieve justice. Now, there's some recent and very prominent cases which I want to highlight, which depict great areas of justice. Do we have my PowerPoint ready with the video?
Yes, we have the video ready.
All right. Well, I'm going to prompt you in just 1 second. I want to begin our analysis with the current trial that's going on in Brunswick, Glenn County, Georgia. That's the trial of 3 white men charged with the murder of 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery on February 23rd, 2020, while Arbery was merely jogging in a residential neighborhood. The 3 white defendants, while driving their truck, chased Arbery. They stopped the truck. One confronted Arbery with a shotgun and a struggle ensued, and Arbery was fatally shot. Now, I want you all to take note of this before this video begins. The trial in Glenn County is a county that is 62% white and 26% Black. Now, this case has always been strictly scrutinized because not only the horrible facts surrounding Arbery's senseless killing, but in the recent days, this case has come under strict scrutiny because of the selection of the jury, which just occurred a few days ago. During the jury selection process, both parties can strike or excuse potential jurors for cause when the judge finds that they cannot decide the case impartially. Additionally, each side may exercise what's called certain preemptory strikes to excuse additional jurors without offering a reason at all. Now, in the Aubrey trial, the attorneys for the defense, the three white defendants, used their preemptory strikes, those strikes where you don't have to give a reason, to strike all of their Black potential jurors except one. As a result, this trial has begun with 11 white jurors and only one Black juror. Now, of course, the prosecution raised the issue as to whether or not the jury selection process was not fair and equitable, but was discriminatory against Blacks. So at this time, can you please play the video and let's hear how the judge rationalized his decision to let the trial go on with only one Black juror and 11 white jurors. No sound.
The court, when this type of motion is brought before it, is asked to do really two things, make two primary findings. The first of which, this court has found that there appears to be intentional discrimination in the panel. That's that prima facie case. And I guess before I get into this, one of the challenges that I think counsel recognized in this case is the racial overtones in the case. And those can't, at least here without the jury present, based on the questioning, we have not been able to escape those discussions with the panel, and they've just come up in a lot of different contexts. So, you know, this is sort of a continuation of a conversation that I think will continue for a long time with respect to this case, and maybe many others. And so we start getting into this question about race. And again, quite a few African-American jurors were excused through preemptory strikes exercised by the defense. But that doesn't mean that the court has the authority to reseat simply again because there's this prima facie case, because we see it. Sort of one of those, it's not one of those we see it, therefore it is. There's now additional steps the court needs to engage in. One of those steps is the exercise we just went through, which is going through those particular strikes and hearing from the defendants in this particular case on a reverse Batson on why those strikes were exercised. And then based on all of that, the court is in a position where it's got to make another finding, which is that the defendants are not genuine when they gave a reason, and that the reason they were claiming is not the real reason those particular jurors were struck. Batson is very limited in what it actually provides the court with as far as an instrument, because, at least in the state of Georgia, the court, if it hears a legitimate, non-discriminatory, clear, reasonably specific, and related reason, and reason related to the case, that is usually enough to get the court to a finding in this third phase where the panelist doesn't need to be reseated. There are other states that have a different approach, actually get much more specific. Point to Washington as one of those states that's looked at Batson and recognized the limitations it places on the court. But effectively, what the court's being asked to do here is determine whether or not the defense is not being genuine with respect to these strikes. And there's all sorts of case law out there, including case law about whether or not you're treating, in this case, it would be African-American potential panelists versus Caucasian, how specific the questions have to be and how closely related they are. And I'll tell you, in this particular case, Batson's limitations, I think, are clearly out there. In this particular case, there are these significant overtones of race to begin with. And then we have numerous additional preemptory strikes. We're not just limited to the ones that statutorily set out there. And then we have extensive questioning of each of the panelists, which start differentiating everybody for different reasons based on answers that are given. Because of that, it becomes very difficult for the court to start working through this problem of, are these really genuine reasons that are out there? And it gets to the point that I think was raised actually in the Batson decision. I wrote it down. It's, Justice Marshall in his concurrence was talking about Batson. And he said specifically, the decision today will not end the racial discrimination that preemptories inject into the jury selection process. And the reason he said that was because his view of it was that preemptories just give the parties the opportunity to place the court and the system into this this balancing of race versus legitimate purpose. And again, this case makes it difficult because race has been injected into this process, and we have a significant number of preemptories. All that's to say, I've worked through each one of these. I've listened to the defense. Again, in the state of Georgia, all the defense needs to do is provide that legitimate, non-discriminatory, clear, reasonably specific, and related reason. A very adept counsel here, and they've been able to explain to the court why, separate from race, those individuals were in fact struck from the panel. Does not change the fact that
the truth is that Hollywood's elite
All right, we can end it.
get ripped while adding 1215.
We went to an ad. Okay.
So
initial.
do you want me to end it or keep going?
Well, basically, he's going to conclude, of course, he's going to deny. We can conclude it right here. As you heard, the judge went through a lot of reasoning, even after he admitted that he felt that the defense discriminated against the Black jurors by striking them, and the preemptive strikes, they did those before this inquiry of the judge without having to state a reason. That's what a peremptory strike is, to excuse someone without a reason. But even the judge realized that jury selection process was racially discriminatory. But then what did he do? He bent over backwards to try to justify using the black letter law of the US Supreme Court case of Batson v. Kentucky, where the Supreme Court originally held, and in that setting, it was the prosecution that was striking all of the Black jurors. But he bent over backwards to say that if the defense could come up with a reason other than race as to why those Black jurors were struck, it wasn't discriminatory. How many of you all believe that is true? Did the judge look at the fact that the process that the defense attorney used had a disparate impact on Black serving on the jury? And as a side, one of the defense attorneys even stated in an interview during this trial that he was seeking bubbas. He used that word, bubbas, to comprise the jury. And he defined a bubba as an uneducated white male over 40 years of age. That goes to intent, the mental state of what the defense was attempting to do. The judge did not even consider, which in my opinion, whatever reason the defense attorneys gave the court after it was forced to state a reason based on the challenge by the prosecutors that this was a discriminatory jury selection process, he didn't consider whether or not it was a pretext. But those of us who have been the victims of racial discrimination know that what happened here in this case was definitely not fair. It was not equitable. Only one juror was selected when Blacks comprised 26% of that population in that county. Will this result in a fair and equitable verdict? Only time will tell at the conclusion of the case as to whether or not Ahmaud Arbery and his family will receive justice. And I want to look at another case that's going on currently that will emphasize and give us an insight into whether or not the Black letter law, when applied, can in fact result in injustice and inequity. I want to discuss at this point the case of 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse. He's on trial in Kenosha, Wisconsin, for the shooting of 3 men and killing 2. He went to Kenosha. He was a resident of Ohio. He didn't even live in Wisconsin. And this was during the time of the unrest after Jacob Black, a Black man, was shot and eventually paralyzed by the police. So Rittenhouse took a AR-15 rifle, traveled from Ohio to Wisconsin to allegedly protect the property of people in Wisconsin, Kenosha, Wisconsin. So let's see how the judge handled a pretrial motion as to how the actual victims in this case could be referred to. Could you key up that video, please? Okay.
Kyle Rittenhouse is set to go on trial next week for murder. The teenager killed 2 people in Kenosha, Wisconsin during protests last year in the aftermath of the Jacob Blake police shooting. Now, what has a lot of people paying attention this morning is a pretty controversial decision by the judge in a pre-trial hearing, as there were some ground rules set that the prosecution is not happy with.
The word victim is a loaded word. And I think alleged victim is a cousin to it. Let the evidence show what the evidence shows, and if the evidence shows that any or more than one of these people were engaged in arson, rioting, or looting, then I'm not going to tell the defense they can't call them that.
Okay, Early Star co-anchor and attorney and legal reporter Laura Jarrett joins us. Now, let me just make crystal clear what happened there in case people didn't get it. The judge just said that the people Kyle Rittenhouse killed, and there's no dispute over the fact that he killed them, they cannot be called victims, the people that he killed. They can, the judge says, however, be called rioters and looters.
And that's the part I think people are finding so disturbing. The prosecution is calling it a double standard. And in reality, they're dead. They cannot defend themselves at this trial, right? And typically, when there's an agreement that somebody has been harmed in some way, injured or been killed, victim is an accepted term. There are defense lawyers who've been arguing for years that it is prejudicial, that it implies guilt, and that it taints the jury's mind. Courts are split on this. Jury instructions use the term victim all the time. Some people define it in different ways. But at bottom here, what you're pointing out is that the judge took it a step further by saying that the people who died should be cast in the light for the crimes that they committed, when in fact people go to jail for killing people who commit crimes all the time. And so I think that's the part that's really got people's attention. And if you're the prosecutor on the case, you're going to say this is extremely prejudicial, but there's not much they can do about it. Because remember, if Kyle Rittenhouse gets off on this, if he's found not guilty, they cannot retry him.
Yeah, there's not an appeal for the
No.
prosecution. That's not how it works.
Exactly. And so it's interesting. I think, one of the things to remember is why is this even coming up, right? Rittenhouse is going to say self-defense. He's going to say, I was so afraid from all of these looters and arsonists, but evidence 101 tells you that is not going to fly. And that's why this evidence shouldn't have been let in, because whether someone was setting fire to a building nearby should have no bearing on whether Kyle Rittenhouse was afraid for his life and thought that it was okay to shoot that person, right? That those two things don't go together. So I think this trial is going to be extremely fraught. The judge has also decided that the defense can let in evidence that the police on the scene nearby told Rittenhouse and others, we appreciate you guys. So you can tell this is going to just be fraught from top to bottom, and jury selection begins Monday.
They can't be called alleged.
All right, you could.
They're not
you could
even
stop it there.
Cease.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Well, what do y'all think about that? How many times have you all either watching television or read something in the newspaper about a person that was the object of a criminal act? And they were always referred to as what? Victims. So how does this judge reach the conclusion, and this conclusion then precludes the state from referring to the two people that were killed, who could, just like the reporter said, cannot speak for themselves now, and the one person who was shot cannot be referred to victims before the jury. But the the defense can refer to them as rioters, looters, and arsonists. Does that seem prejudicial to you? It definitely does to me. Does that seem fair, ethical, or just? No, not to me. And just as the reporter stated, if the state loses this case and those three individuals are acquitted, there is no remedy, criminal remedy, under those circumstances. I believe this case and the other case really emphasizes how judges have unbridled control over what goes on in their courtrooms. Judges are the referees in determining and interpreting the law and the application of the law. And this is just going to be on my soapbox right now. That's why it is so important for us to register people to vote and vote on the down ticket, not just for the person who is running for president, but the person who's running for district attorney, for our judges, school board members, sheriffs. This case shows that it is very important because these people, including elected judges, really have a very important and dominant impact on our lives. And I am going to touch on one other topic in my brief time, and I want to talk about another legal doctrine that's in the limelight at this point in time, and that is the need to repeal qualified immunity. Qualified immunity for police officers shield most of them from accountability for police brutality or the use of excessive force. Now, qualified immunity was established by the Supreme Court in 1967 and effectively protects state and local officials, such as myself as a state court judge, including police officers, from personal liability unless they are determined to have violated an individual's clearly established statutory or constitutional right. Right now, the abolition of the qualified immunity remains one of the biggest battles in Congress today. Democrats in the House, they passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. However, the Senate has failed to do so. This bill, if passed, would abolish qualified immunity. Critics and reform advocates say that this doctrine of qualified immunity gives officers license to use excessive force with impunity, such as in the cases that we all are very familiar with, such as the police shooting of Jacob Blake that left him paralyzed, Breonna Taylor shot by the Louisville police while she was in her apartment on March 13, 2020. Philando Castile shot by Minnesota police on July 6, 2016. Sandra Bland in Waller County, Texas, who was killed under suspicious means while in police custody on July 10th. And the cases go on and on. An independently compiled database found that more than 1,000 people die as a result of police harm in 2019. And of those 1,000 people who died in 2019, 26% were Black, 18% were Hispanic, and 4% were from other racial groups. Even though Black people make up less than 13% of the population, but are killed and shot at a rate twice as high as that of whites. Is this legal doctrine of of qualified immunity fair and equitable? Oh, there are so many other areas to ponder, such as poor criminal defendants being appointed counsel of inexperienced, incompetent, and insensitive attorneys in those jurisdictions that allow appointed counsel for criminal defendants, as opposed to a public defender's program that is housed with qualified, experienced attorneys. Is it fair that poor people who have to result in appointed inexperienced counsel with no resources to hire investigators, no resources to hire experts, are able or unable rather to lodge a meaningful defense? However, their more affluent counterparts can pose such a positive defense, resulting in their acquittal. The application of the Black letter law says these people who are poor, they're provided counsel. However, is that counsel effective as required by the U.S. Constitution? In the last presentation, I heard that the presenter said that we have a broken medical community. We also have a broken legal community. My time is up, but I would like to look at why we are here today and look at I'm going to change that. It was written as the Tuskegee syphilis study, but after Dr. Warren said these were men who were untreated and not a study. These were men who were untreated for their syphilis. And that resulted in oppressive, racially discriminatory, and was an unethical project. But something did come out of that project, a law Congress passed the National Research Act in 1974 that established a commission to regulate human subjects research and establish ethical guidelines for human subjects research. This act is the perfect example of how ethics, compassion, and justice intersected for the formation of the Black Letter Law. I will close with a quote from Jonathan Sachs that I think is very appropriate today, and it is as follows. True freedom requires the rule of law and justice and a judicial system in which the rights of some are not secured by the denial of the rights of others. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Judge Biggers. That was stupendous. If I were going to choose two of the two cases of which to reflect, those would have been the two, because those are the ones I have so many questions of. And I do have one after Attorney Bryant speaks. I'm interested in your take as a judge on the young man Gene, Botham Gene, and who was shot by a police officer in his apartment, and there's a police officer received 10 years, a female officer. She thought that this was her apartment.
Oh yeah.
So, and that's very personal to me because he was 26 years old, and that was the same age my son was. He's a young professional Black male, so is my son. So my son lived in an apartment, so did he. So in every respect, this could have been my son, right? So
right.
Very interested in that. All right, Mr. Hafiz, please introduce Attorney Charlene Bryant.
Yes, thank you. So the respondent for this session is a Charlene Bryant. Yeah. So actually, she was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and she received her Bachelor's of Arts from New York University and studied British literature at the University of London for 2 semesters. Professor Bryant received her Juris Doctorate from Georgetown University Law Center, and she also studied European Union law at the University of Spain at Madrid. Professor Bryant also served as a summer intern at the District of Columbia Public Defender's Office and with the New York City chapter of the American Civil Libraries Union. And one more interesting thing about her is she also worked in the community partnership unit as an educated coordinator. So this is the brief introduction about the Charlene Bryant.
Thank you, Farooq.
Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. It is good to be here. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you, Dr. Hodge. Thank you, Dr. Warren. Thank you, the entire team. And it's good to be back. So, but interestingly enough, I had the opportunity to listen to Judge Bigger's presentation, and she mentioned something about the systems are broken. But earlier during this event, Drs. Fuller and McIntyre made this comment that, or actually provided us with this term that resonated with me and Dr. Hodge, and I think other members of the panel with respect to deliberate systems of inequity. So we can't be surprised when these things happen. But oddly enough, we always are. We're always just outraged. We're always surprised. We always can't figure out what's going on, but it's obvious what's going on. And I'm going to quote something from James Baldwin. James Baldwin said, "The Negro's experience of the white world cannot possibly create in him any respect for the standards by which the white world claims to live. His own condition is overwhelmingly proof that some white people do not live by these standards." Clearly, history has shown us, then and now, that this system was deliberate. There's nothing, I don't think that at this point in time, we should question the results that we see. When we talk about justice, we talk about the law, and we throw ethics and we throw equity in there. I think it's important for us to really take a look at how we kind of mosh these words together. Because justice is an ideal, and equity, fairness is an action word. And so what we're seeing is that there can't possibly be any justice in the criminal justice system because there's no equity, because the people who are privileged to run that system don't see us as human beings. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to share actually, and then share my screen and go through this presentation. So the justice system has two faces. They have the face for them and they have the face for us. And if that wasn't made clear to you, January 6th, the raid on the Capitol should have made it very clear, because the people who were charged and ultimately convicted, if you take a look at some of the sentences they received, they're absolutely ridiculous. When you're talking about people threatening the security of the country, and you're talking about a year, 6 months, probation, for threatening the security of this country. So before I even get into that, I want us to be clear about how we approach this problem. And the theme of this year's event was the Black woman. And I want to just preface that by saying there's no Black woman without a Black man, and there's no Black man without a Black woman. So let's now recondition ourselves, because as a result of slavery, we were conditioned to believe that we were separate and apart. And even today, you have some Black women who are very quick to go after a Black man. So it's not enough of us for us to take that approach with respect to our community. So we have to be mindful of that as well. Black women's problems are not white women's feminism. We are fighting the LGBT community, white feminism. Black people are joining these organizations, and we are fighting for ultimately their objectives and their goals. But when it's time for them to fight for us, where are they? Our problems are uniquely different. We don't have the same problems that white women have. Frances Harper, now you're talking about back in the day. She called them out. You white women speak here of, move this over, of rights, calling them out for their lack of female solidarity across racial divides. They use our numbers to help support their objectives, but when it's time for them to separate or for them to acknowledge what we're going through, they don't acknowledge it at all. So maybe we need to take several steps back to think about how we need to approach the problems that we deal with on a daily basis. Look, equal pay. Black women are in terms of pay, we receive the least amount in terms of pay. There is a huge disparity between Black women and white women. There's a huge disparity between Black women and white men. Media depiction. I'll get to that in a minute. Sexualizing Black girls. It's done all the time. Systematic oppression, which we all as a community have to deal with. Marginalization, cultural imperialism, violence, powerlessness, exploitation. And then it's the conditional victimization. It's us. who have now continued that victimization that was imposed on us as slaves, because we believe that we can't. I hear it all the time in my classes. Now, I'm gonna leave this here right here. I'm gonna just drop that right there, because 3 months we listened to what was going on with Gabby Petito and that case. Meanwhile, there's 64,000 Black women missing in this country. Missing. You don't hear about these people at all. You don't hear about these Black women. Here's one. You guys know her? Do you know her? Has anybody heard anything about her? She's been missing since October 14th. But yet Gabby Petito, she was missing. And it was 10 minutes of every newscast on every channel responded to the fact that this white woman was missing. But Josiah Moore from New Jersey went to the deli, never came home. Oh, maybe the FBI is going to join the search. Maybe. There's no justice and equity or respect for Black women in this country. Black women are 13% of the population and account for 20% that have been shot and killed by police. We hear about Freddie Gray, Philando Castile. We hear about, George Floyd. We hear about the men, but we never hear about the women that are victims of police violence. And Sandra Bland, I think Judge Biggers mentioned Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor. And Sandra Bland, that case is still unresolved. We don't know what happened to her. And I got money that nobody's paying any attention to it at this point. Prison, we never talk about Black women in prison. And actually what's been going on is the number since 2000 has decreased considerably. It was a 700% increase from 2000 to 2019. You see the numbers here. African-American women represent 83% of the women who are incarcerated, who are in prison. More than 60% of these women are in state prison and have a child under the age of 18. So we don't even address the issue of how this incarceration impacts the children, because children need their mothers. If their mothers are incarcerated, or if the child is born in prison, that has some emotional impact on that child. Abortion in Black America, and this is one of my favorite topics. And this whole idea of Margaret Sanger and the eugenical movement, I'm sure you guys are very much aware of that, and how we've now come to understand that this eugenical movement is a real movement. It's really happening, and it's been happening for quite some time. And how Black women are the leading consumer of abortions in this country. So the goal is, and the goal has always been, to eradicate this country and other countries of the presence not only of Black women, but Black families. Powerlessness, one of Iris Young's 5 faces of oppression. And I hear it in my classrooms every single day. The students are afraid. They're afraid to stand up. They're afraid to fight back. They don't know how. How are we going to move forward as a community when our young people are afraid and tired and uneducated and don't feel like that they have a way to defeat the oppression that they deal with every day? So you have the mothers of the movement, I call it. And there are a lot of Black women, historical figures who were not judges, who were not lawyers, who were not doctors, but they were people, they were women who recognized that there was some degree of inequity and attempted to move forward to take care of that. And you got Ida B. Wells. I mean, she was a teacher, she was a journalist, and she was an active member of the NAACP. And she devoted a lot of her life to fighting Jim Crow. Charlotte Hawkins Brown, she was an educator. And she, again, she created schools because she recognized the importance of education. Excuse me. Let me go back. You got Mary Church Terrell. And she was one of the first Black women to earn a college degree in this country from Oberlin, not just a bachelor's, but a master's. And so it's important that we now emphasize to our young people that education is important. And we're in a place right now where people are telling our kids they don't need a job. They don't need a job. You don't need a job. You can go look, Google will hire you without a job. And I always tell them that Google will hire the white people without a job. They're not hiring you without a job. So you need your education to bring you out of the oppressive state that you've been raised in to help develop your mind and expand your understanding of the world to make you not only a better person, but much more in terms of marketable and competitive. So you have the demographic threat. You have all these people who live on the planet. Here in the United States, you got almost 330 million people. You got 236 million people who identify as white and 46 million people who identify as Black. But that population is growing. It's growing. But what's interesting is 46 million members of our community, which makes up 14% of the population, 34% of them are sitting in US prisons. So you do the math. That limits our resources in terms of how we move forward to vote and to fight the good fight. There it is. When we talk about law enforcement, and it's important for us to understand that this concept of discrimination, racism, oppression, law enforcement, members of law enforcement are not removed from this, right? We're talking about police, the first line of defense. And typically when something goes wrong, people are pointing their fingers at the police. But what I've determined is that 90% of the chiefs in this country are white males, regardless of the racial demographic of the communities that they serve. 82% of the intermediate supervisors are white males, and 72% of all officers in this country are white males. So this is clearly not a reflection of the diversity of this country. Again, we must impose our existence into the criminal justice system. So while mass incarceration continues to reflect high numbers of unwilling participants, we are sorely neglected in terms of representation with respect to law enforcement. We don't have enough Black law enforcement leaders. You see here, the graph reflects the number of Black police officers in this country versus the number of white, the number of Asian, other, and so on and so forth. So it's not just the Black community that's underrepresented. You see the indigenous, you have Asians and other, actually, I'm sure that the Hispanic community their percentages are a lot higher than the Black community. And there is some proof with regard to statistics that 65%, when there is a person of color, when there's a Black police commander, that the 65% of the violence or the fatal shootings that take place within that community there's less than if a white chief was in charge. So in terms of Black female police officers, again, we only represent 1% in this country. So we're again underrepresented. And then this is where it really gets interesting. It's the prosecutor, because so many people blame the police, but it's really the prosecutor who has all the power. The prosecutor is the one that comes up with the charges and takes the case through the system to prosecute the case. So I think people are, in terms of their being educated about what the role of the prosecutor is, there's clearly a problem. So again, we're talking about, we have about 30,000 prosecuting attorneys in this country. You have 2,300, anywhere from 2,300 to 2,400 district attorneys or chief attorneys in this country. Now, what's interesting is you have 52% of all those chief attorneys or district attorneys are women. So there is a majority with respect to district attorneys. And you see that what they're paid, but you also scroll down to the third to the last bullet point, and you'll see that women earn only 96% of what men earn. So there's still that disparity. Now, in terms of Black prosecutors, we only make up 5.4% of all those prosecutors in this country. And you see that white prosecutors make up 80%. Even the Hispanic or Latino prosecutors are 6.8%. But interestingly enough, we make up 34% of the prison population. Here you have Black women prosecutors, 1.84% of all elected district attorneys in this country. That's all we got, 1.84%. And there's Marilyn Mosby, Kim Garner, Darcel Clark, Kim Fox, Aramis Ayala, and Jackie Lacey. And these are all modern day women who are now fighting the good fight. And interestingly enough, they are being persecuted. They receive death threats all the time. And those threats go unrequited. Just like it was okay for Donald Trump to commit acts, human rights violations on sitting congresswomen, it is okay to send death threats to a Black woman prosecutor. Racism and misogyny, this is what they face. So in addition to them, it's a difficult job. So in addition to trying to do this with some degree of equity, which is not always afforded to us, they have to suffer through racism and this misogyny. And they're threatened regularly. Black judges. Judge Biggers is a judge, but we got nearly 1,700 judgeships authorized across 209 courts in the federal court. And half of those sitting judges, you know, in terms of the judiciary, federal judges, only 9%, almost 10% of the sitting judges in this country are Black. 46 African-American women are sitting in federal courts, comprising 3.4% of all sitting federal judges. So we have, in terms of the number of judges in the criminal justice system, it's a problem. Supreme Court judges never had a Black woman. We got that one kind of Black guy. He's kind of sort of a Black guy, I'm not really sure. Then you got the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. There are no African-American judges on the Seventh Circuit, which is kind of dope, right? Ethics. Ethics are a tool used by the privileged community to oppress. When they talk about justice and you talk about equity, we can't put those two things together. We gotta really be mindful of the words that we use, right? James Baldwin, he said, we can't live by their standards. And at what point are we gonna reevaluate our approach to this problem and come up with a different plan? Because this plan is working slowly, but how many people are becoming victims of this movement? Lopsided laws. Not only is the enforcement of the law lopsided, but the creation of laws are lopsided as well. And they were designed, they were deliberate, as was referred to earlier, to eradicate Black America. These are laws that were created by an unethical, immoral, bigoted, sexist, racist group of people to destroy and oppress and control. And we see this lopsided. I mean, Judge Biggers gave us examples of the lopsided, how the application of the law is completely lopsided, absent justice, absent equity. Now, what's interesting is that the law is steeped in this concept of religion. And you would think that religion crosses all races, all genders, all divides. But the concept of equity, when it comes to the application of even the Constitution, part of that Constitution was steeped with some respect to religion. Yet when we attempt to enforce the Constitution and laws based on the Constitution, it becomes this inequitable enforcement. And it goes unrequited. It's fine. That's just normal every day. It's okay. Galatians, there is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Now, when you go down south where you guys hang out, because I hang out on the East Coast, I hang out in New York City, ain't nobody quoting no scriptures to you like that. But I'm gonna tell you what, This is the foundation for our laws. But the application of the law, this equity that we're all supposed to, with respect to God, we're supposed to believe in, is nowhere to be found. The Quran teaches that all people were created equally by Allah. No race claimed to be superior to another. The Prophet Muhammad also taught that everyone is equal and that the only thing that separates one person from another is their good, bad actions. But that's not how the law. Once it's time to apply that, once it's time to create laws and apply those laws, all of that goes out the window. And it was deliberate. The concept of race, and W.E. Du Bois, your guy, he was concerned about the use of this. Race was invented to separate white from slave. Race was a biological term used to show the slight differences between the different populations of the world. And I mean slight differences. But this word, this term was co-opted by the white slave masters to basically create a divide, between the white and the slave. So race doesn't exist. I think Kamala Harris said that. She said race doesn't, it's a social construct. It's a social construct. So if we start to think differently about how we approach this problem, if we stop talking in terms of race, if we stop allowing ourselves to be divided by race, to be divided by gender, but we're conditioned to believe that. We go to school, we learn that, but we have to recondition ourselves to think differently to approach this problem. Because when we do not, then what we do is we continue to support that problem. It's a tool to further inequities. And that's exactly what it does. There's no equity in the colonizer's justice. There is no such thing as race. So this concept of justice is flawed, because when it's time for a colonizer to employ this idea of justice, they do it there's no equity. There's no reference back to the religion that we all practice. Right? And I think Judge Biggers gave us a definition of what constitutes justice and what is the law. Equity is an action word. It requires someone to act. In order for justice to take place, an action has to take place. Someone has to think to be equitable. And that's not what happens in this country when we talk about the criminal justice system. Not at all. I'm not going to get into this because Judge Biggers got into it. It's not the same. And you have to ask yourself, why don't these people who are in positions of power, who are currently the majority of the people, and they have, in terms of population, and they have a huge stronghold in the criminal justice system, why is it that they don't practice this concept of equity? Because from an ethical standpoint, I mean, it just, to me, when you violate the terms of your religion, to me, that's kind of immoral. And from a professional standpoint, it's unethical. But yet again, white America continues to get away with this. It goes unrequited. They get away with it. Just like Derek Chauvin in the George Floyd case. Why didn't the prosecution charge him with first degree? He was charged as if he was reckless and negligent. But clearly he knew exactly what he was doing. So there is this difference with respect to charges and even the sentencing. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of those January 6 people who raided the Capitol, their sentences were a lot less severe than, you know, if a Black man walked into, if he's in a certain jurisdiction, he walks into a store and he steals a beer, he walks out. There have been incidents where something as minor as that, people have gotten in excess of 10 years. So, you know, this whole system is hypocritical. I'm gonna be good. I'm not gonna say what I wanna say, but it's hypocritical. And so we can't be surprised when we see and hear some of the things that we see and hear when it comes to Black people being in this system. And I mentioned earlier, President Trump was the perfect example of this unethical privilege. He did whatever he was big enough to do, whatever he wanted to do. He said whatever he wanted to say, and it went unresponded to. No one said anything. Do you think Obama would have got away with all of this? Any of that, all the stuff that Trump said and did, do you think Obama would have been able to complete his term? Of course not. So we need to start thinking about how a new approach to how we do this, because the law has been set up. It's been deliberate. Look at Emancipation Proclamation. Look, Lincoln only freed the slaves because he was making a deal with the South. It wasn't like out of the kindness of his heart or from a moral standpoint, he knew it was wrong. The 13th Amendment is a trick bag. The 13th Amendment says, look, slavery, no, you can't do that anymore. But wait a minute. Now, if this person is convicted of a crime, oh, well, then you might, we might be able to use you. You might be able to become a slave. We will enslave you. And that's the foundation for mass incarceration. Black codes, I'm not even gonna get into this. Jim Crow, Black segregation. The foundation of this country was built on racism. It's just what it is. And so for us to think anything different, who are we fooling? For us to continue to beg them to give us something that God has imbued to us. God has given us this. Why are we asking them for the things that we have as members of the society? God has given us our freedom, but yet we continue to protest and do all these things and beg these people to give us the things that belong to us by human nature. So at the end of the day, my thinking is that we need to really reevaluate our approach to how we're doing this. We do, because we need to, if we're going to infiltrate the system, we need to be able to educate our students in order to better equip them. That means that we have to take more responsibility for our communities and make sure that our kids are learning what they need to learn in order to be competitive, in order for them to be a resource to help move the system along, because this system alone is the demise and the downfall of our race. And I'm using that word, even though I shouldn't, but it is the downfall of the Black community, Black America. I can show you one thing and then I will be done. Let me see. And this gives you an example of how Black America, how Black women, Black Americans are treated.
Woman getting handcuffed, naked, with a dozen male officers watching. Now, she wants you to see the body camera video, but tonight the city went to federal court to try to keep it secret. Here's CBS 2 investigator Dave Savini.
I just gotten home from work, and I was undressing in my bedroom.
It was a cold February night, and Anjanette Young, a social worker, had just finished her shift at the hospital.
You see them running up to the apartment complex with the battering ram in their hand, a crowbar. It was so traumatic to hear the way the thing was hitting the door. And it happened so fast, I didn't have time to put on clothes.
And suddenly, she found herself frozen in fear, completely naked, in a room full of men. 9 body cameras rolling.
And you're just standing there.
And I'm just standing there. I mean, terrified, humiliated, not even understanding why in that moment that this is happening to me.
And the first thing police reach for is not clothing, it's handcuffs.
There were big guns and guns with lights and scopes on them, and they were yelling at me, you know, put your hands up, put your hands up.
What are you thinking right now?
I just remember, you know, being so afraid. It's one of those moments where I just felt like that I could have died that night. If I had made one wrong move, I felt like they would have shot me. I truly believe that they would have shot me.
A police officer wraps a short coat around her shoulder, still leaving her front fully exposed. Even the sergeant in charge of the raid just stands there talking to her while she has nothing covering her. Then she gets a blanket.
They just threw something over me. And my hands are behind my back and I'm handcuffed. So there was no way for me to secure the blanket that they put around me.
But the blanket just keeps sliding open. More humiliation.
You need to tell me what you're looking for. What are you looking for?
You can see how some officers just stand there until this one, wearing a mask, sees what's happening and goes and holds it in place.
It felt like forever for me. It felt like forever.
Oh my God, this cannot be right. How is this legal?
Listen how she repeatedly tells the raid team they were in the wrong place.
You have the wrong place. You got the wrong house. You got the wrong house.
We counted. She says it at least 43 times.
You got the wrong house.
And she was right. They were in the wrong house. Our investigation uncovered police failed to do the most basic research before getting the search warrant approved. We found they simply took the word of an informant who gave them Anjanette Young's address. The informant claimed a 23-year-old man who was a known felon had a gun and ammo inside.
I don't know who that person is. I've been living here for 4 years and nobody lives here but me. Okay. You don't have to shout. I don't have to shout. This is ridiculous. You got me in here because I'm naked. You kicked my house in. And I keep telling you, you got the wrong place.
Then, during the raid, something happens. Watch as two of the officers go to their squad car and begin reviewing their notes about the warrant. CPD would not comment on what you're about to hear the officers saying a few minutes later.
It wasn't initially approved or some crap.
What does that mean?
I have no idea, because I mean they told him it was approved, and then I guess that person messed up on their end.
Messed up is an understatement. So, where was the target? Our investigation revealed he was awaiting trial on home confinement here at a different apartment in Anjanette Young's complex. How easy would it have been to locate him? Easy, real easy, because he was wearing a police tracking device, an electronic monitoring bracelet. It's possible he could have even heard the raid happening, because records show he was confined to the unit right next door.
But I'm telling you it's wrong. I'm asking you to let me call somebody. Asking you to let me put some clothes on. I'll sit here and let you do whatever you need to do. But let me call somebody, let me call an attorney, because I'm telling you this is wrong. I have nothing to do with whoever this person is you're looking for.
We found if they would have done a little bit more research, they might have found where the target actually lived.
Yes.
I think Screw Up was being too kind, because ultimately this is a constitutional rights issue.
Keenan Salter is Anjanette Young's attorney and is suing the police department.
If this had been a young woman in Lincoln Park by herself in her home, naked, a young white woman, let's just be frank, if the reaction would have been the same. I don't think it would have been. I think they would have saw that woman, rightfully so, as someone who was vulnerable, someone who deserved protection, someone who deserved to have their dignity maintained. They viewed Ms. Young as less than human.
They did eventually walk her to a room to remove the handcuffs so she could get dressed, but then put them right back on and kept questioning her.
There are no firearms in this place?
There's no gun in this place. I'm a social worker. I've been a social worker for 20 years. I follow the law. I don't get in trouble for anything. I don't do illegal stuff. I'm not that person. You got the wrong information.
At this point, the sergeant in charge of the raid tells the officer who got the warrant to step outside.
Let's go talk outside.
But you won't hear it because once outside, the body camera is shut off. Back inside Anjanette's home, another officer finally uncuffs her. She had been bound for 20 minutes. Listen as the sergeant returns with a new message.
We believe your story.
And you can see him trying to fix the door they busted so she could close it and lock it. But it was too damaged to repair, so watch as they try to find something to wedge it shut. They settle on an ironing board.
Surreal?
Surreal. It's almost like a bad movie. When I watch this, I feel like I'm watching a movie. But those are no actors. I'm no actor. This is my real life. And it happened to me. They're adding trauma to people's lives that will be with them for the rest of their lives. The work is warranted. They need to do the work, but they need to do it right. They can't just callously do it and leave people's lives in ruins because they got it wrong.
The sergeant in charge apologized.
For the most part, you just see that, in terms of being a Black woman in this country, it is what it is. There's no respect, there's no justice, there's no equity. And it was actually said that if this had been a white woman, the circumstances would have been completely different. And that's always the case in this country. It's always different when it's a white woman. And Judge Biggers was exactly right. The majority of the police officers in this country are undereducated, they're undertrained, and they don't need qualified immunity because they don't know what to do with it. It's bad enough that they have this huge amount of discretion where they can make decisions that impact people's lives forever. That's bad enough. But to give them qualified immunity, here in New York, that's been revoked. Officers don't have qualified immunity in New York. And as far as I'm concerned, if we're going to take away qualified immunity from officers, we need to consider taking away absolute immunity from politicians. Because in a way, they do more damage than anybody else. I mean, there was mention at some point during that, a lot of the laws that are created by politicians. And oftentimes, a lot of the crimes that they commit while they're in office are shield them, the absolute immunity shields them. So, I mean, in terms of being a Black woman in this country, it's a difficult thing. It's very difficult. And we have to now, as we have to, again, I reiterate, we cannot separate ourselves from our Black men because that's all we have. And we have to start to work as a collective to do things together to move us forward. Because if we don't do that in this country, we're done. We're done. So we need to make sure that our kids are educated, that even if you don't become a lawyer or a judge, you still need to be educated about the criminal justice system because too many of us are a part of the criminal justice system and are uneducated about the system that has an impact not just on their lives, the defendant or the suspect, but it has impact on the lives of the families that have to deal now with an incarcerated man or woman. So, I mean, at the end of the day, hey, look, sisters, I salute y'all. I salute my brothers and I salute my sisters. It's not easy being Black, not in this country, but for those who've gotten to this point, like, Dr. Hodge and all you guys who've gotten to this point where you established yourself and maintain some degree of integrity and responsibility for moving your people forward, I salute you. I salute you all. Keep going, keep moving. Peace be with you. Respect from the East Coast.
Thank you very much, my dear sister. Thank you very much. Before I give it over to Brother Hafiz to ask questions, I ask that you post. Where you disappeared to? Come back here. You got to answer some questions. You got to answer. You got to pony up. Attorney Bryant.
My bad.
Okay. Before I turn over to Brother Hafiz, just as I gave Judge Biggers a kind of question to lay on her heart, I actually have one for you because I'm very much aware. First of all, this was some hard stuff to see. The whole thing from Judge Biggers and the young fella Rittenhouse and Arbery. I mean, it just kind of demonstrates that Dr. Warren, I'm really doing a good job today, not using the words that's on my mind. The words that could jump off my lips, I'm holding them back. I'm holding them back. I'm being a good guy. But
I'm glad you're doing it because I wouldn't hold them back.
that video we have our dear sister Monica Beamer. She's on as well, Attorney Beamer. And I'm telling you that video was so excruciating. All of them, but that my dear sister naked before all of these men is excruciating because I see that in her, my mother, my sister, my daughter, and Black people are so kind in that their retaliation is that their revenge quotient seems to be like really patient. But nevertheless, I want to push you on one point. The notion of race as a construct, and every one of us who have done some reading in race come away with that, right? That race is a social construct. But so is numbers, right? There's what is a number? Wait, show me 5. Show me 5ness, 6ness, 7ness, 8ness. There's no such thing as a number, but we use numbers all the time because we use them by convention. That is, we agree that the best way to explain how much money I have in my pocket is to use numbers. And I think that's what has emerged in our colloquial language about race. And then there's so much weight because there's no way to talk about, have the conversation about Blackness, whiteness, and otherness without talking about Black and white and others. And the context is usually called race. So the question I'm raising, Attorney Bryant, is how do we have the conversation without, and we'll let you think about it first, and let Judge Briggers go first because she had the first question. But how do we really conceptualize this experience without engaging the language that has created this experience or being a part of this experience? That is the notion of race. And secondly, it is so vicious, and you pointed out that almost you sound very Malcolm X-ish. And I love Brother Malcolm. That's why I wear the beard. I love Brother Malcolm. As a matter of fact, Du Bois said in 1963, as he was getting on that plane for Ghana, he said, "Chin up, fight on, but in the end you're going to lose." Right. So how do you think we should really engage this in what seems like a losing battle in this experiment? And those videos that were done in the 21st century, they weren't done in the 20th century. Those videos are yesterday and today. These are now. What do we do? What's our next step? So Judge Briggers, can you go first with the first question I asked you about? How do you view the Botham Jean and the way the judge responded by coming off the stand and hugging him? Please share with us what you think about that, Judge Briggers. And then after that, please please everyone write questions in because I'll be writing. I love this. I'll be writing questions all day. So Judge Briggers, the floor is yours.
All right. I knew you were gonna go there when you mentioned that case.
All right.
And I can tell you, I just don't understand it because the judge was a Black female. And the conclusion of the trial, I could not relate, understand how she could come down off the bench and hug the defendant and give her a Bible. I also could not understand how the victim's brother, during the part of the trial for the victim's impact statement, could say that he forgave the defendant. Now, I guess I'm from old school. I grew up back in the day when there was segregation. And I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, close to Dynamite Hill. My father was the first Black U.S. Deputy Marshal in Alabama, so we used to get bomb threats on our home. He was appointed by Robert Kennedy. So I have no illusions about this country and this country's position on race. And I think that today, sometimes our young people take for granted a lot of the rights that we had to fight for and others had to die for. I think that the judge was wrong in coming down off the bench, and she showed her bias and prejudice by doing what she did. And I'm going to say that in most of these cases, I've been to judicial training, and I'm going to tell you, all this about judges ought to be impartial and fair. Every judge, every juror brings into their deliberations, into their experiences, into their job, their own biases, their own prejudices, their own experiences. But you, as far as a judge, we have to, first of all, recognize when we do have those biases and be very intentional to not let those biases or prejudices invade our process for administering justice. But you said, how did that particular defendant get a 10-year verdict in that trial?
Yes.
Because nobody is impartial, truly impartial. Those jurors brought their own biases and prejudices into that courtroom. And because she was a Black female, the defendant was a white female, she was entitled and given privileges that a Black female would not receive. So that's the way that this country, I agree with everything that Attorney Bryant said about how this country was built. And after Donald Trump became president, he just licensed everybody. They can just forget about decorum. And if they are racist, they can say they're racist. It's all right. And they have come out of the woodwork. But it's incumbent upon us to not rely on other people to do our job that we need to do, just like the women who have been missing. We should not rely on white media to bring those names and those women to the forefront. We need to be doing that ourselves. As a judge, I am so glad I was able to get elected a judge. I would not entertain a no-knock warrant. If a police officer comes to me for a search warrant, they know, don't come asking for a no-knock warrant because I'm not going to give it. I'm not going to approve it. So in my position, and I guess it's kind of unique being in Macon County because our police officers, most of them are Black. I'm the only Black judge. Our circuit judges are white. We have a Black probate judge as well. Our sheriff's deputies are Black. We kind of know everybody. So it's a little different as far as law enforcement here than some other parts of the country. But we're going to have to take on the responsibility to do what we need to do and not rely on others to do our job for us.
All right, thank you very much, because you had another question that I just flew out of my head. Because
I kind of want to comment. I want to comment on that.
Go ahead. Don't forget to answer your other question as well, Charlene.
Okay, all right.
Do both. Comment and answer.
I mean, there was a question in the chat, but also too, Judge Biggers pretty much touched on it. And, they might come knocking on my door after this one, but the Panthers were actually moving in that direction. And I wouldn't call it 100% segregation, but what I would say is that they were at that point in time being responsible for their community. So short of segregation, I agree with Judge Biggers, like we need to take a more active role in our communities to address the problems, these unique problems that we have. Go ahead, Hodge.
No, I mean, you could go ahead and answer the other question I asked.
About what you do?
About the racial construction.
Oh, about how race is a social construct and how numbers are a social construct. I mean, I think the whole concept of race was designed for us. It's this inexorable relationship between the two. So we're at the point now where we can't talk about one without the other. We can't. It's so difficult for us. We've been conditioned, we've been socialized to connect those two things together. So the only really thing short of what we can do at this point is when we start to educate our young people through our youth, that's where our change takes place. And if we start to really educate our youth about the difference between, or the real definition of what constitutes race, and give them some history about race, maybe they will think differently before they use race. I don't think we're at the point where we can completely eradicate the definition that's been imposed on us, because we still live in this very racist environment. But so in order for us to maintain who we are and to express ourselves and communicate effectively and do what we need to do, we have to continue to use those words and with respect to the context. But I think when we start to educate our youth and give them some background about where the origin of that word and why that word was developed, just like, in terms of the slave patrol. A lot of people know that the slave patrol was the first organized police department in this country. So when you look at the badges of the various police departments in the country, they mirror the badges that were used by the slave patrol. So we need to start providing, Judge Bigger said it, we need to be more responsible, look into our history, educate our youth about the things that they're saying and the things that they're doing, and perhaps that'll give them a better opportunity to do things differently.
Thank you. But Brother Hafiz, you could start asking questions now.
Yes, there is a question for you, Dr. Bryant, from the Monica. She's saying that, do you have some suggestions about how we impact the system? What do we do differently?
I mean, for the most part, Judge Biggers brought up, I think either Dr. Hodge and Judge Biggers brought up that both of deemed fiasco. And, unfortunately, when a lot of us, for some reason, some of us are, as we move through the system, and we've become educated, we move through society, some of us Black people, I'm gonna just keep it a stack. I'm gonna keep it 100. We become Toms. That's exactly what we do. And we're brainwashed to believe that we're better because now we are sitting amongst all these colonizers. That's exactly what that judge was. She was brainwashed. She was a Tom. Because in light of the conditions that exist in this country today, for you to step off that bench and hug that white woman after she just killed a white man under the circumstances to which we still don't know is absolutely a head scratcher. So we have to be mindful, because there's a small percentage of us who are even involved in the criminal justice system with respect to enforcement. We have to be really mindful. We have to find ways to maintain our integrity and really stay focused on the responsibility that we have, not just to ourselves, not just to the system, but to the people who are involved in the system. And clearly, I don't know where her head was at. Listen, if it was a different time, a different place, if we were all Rastafarian and we was blowing dunk and we were doing what we do, then okay, even though it's unprofessional, as indicated by Judge Biggers, because it shows her impartiality, it shows a bias. But okay, I get it then, because we're all loving one another, but we're not loving one another in the United States at all, not in the least. And so for her to make that move clearly showed that she's not there to fulfill her moral and ethical obligation to her people, her community. So old girl, like, she don't got my vote, so.
And I want to add, and I want to add this.
Go ahead.
I want to add this. I think we are the only race that does not teach and train our children about our culture, about how important we are as people, how we should have self-respect for one another, because we came from kings and queens. When my children were growing up, we didn't have white dolls in the house. We didn't have white images on anything. And we trained them to be proud of who they are and that they can be and accomplish anything as anyone else can accomplish. But I don't find that same kind of confidence or love for self-love when I see juveniles come before me in juvenile court. They're all lost. And I think we're going to have to get back to, as a community, training and appreciating and seeing how important our own culture is, because we don't do that. We're probably the only race or group or ethnicity that does not really appreciate and find joy in our culture. We need to start doing that, because if we can practice self-love, we can love ourselves, and we can love one another, and we can stop all of this killing, Black on Black crime, and other things that we see negative in our community.
That's the plan. That was the plan from the Giddy. You know what? That's for us to destroy each other, to destroy us. And that's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly, and the thing is, what we've learned from COVID is what I've learned from COVID is what you can't control, you kill, but what you can't control, you ignore. So, let's not wear a mask. Let's just go out and party. Let's do what we do. But that's just a sign of the inability to control. And that's just one of those beautiful things that certain population of people, their DNA, they're filled with the need to control.
Mr. Hafiz?
Yes, there is a raised hand of Shanti Davis, and I would say to go ahead for your question, Shanti.
Okay. So first I want to say that I definitely agree that we as a people need to have self-determination in which we control the things within our own community. And going into law enforcement, I think that we need to have a blueprint on how we want law enforcement to act within our own community, because within my own experience is that sometimes the Black police officers are worse than the white ones. And a quick example that I can give is that unfortunately it was when I was in Tuskegee, is that I was out in at a gathering at an apartment complex, got a little bit late, and when the police did show up to break up the gathering, is that they decided their first go-to was to bring out the dogs. And especially with the historical context in Alabama, it seemed like it was lost on the police officers what that actually means. And with a line of Black police officers and a white police officer, pretty much the one telling them like where to go and everything like that, it was very telling that even if you have your own people in positions, everybody that's, I think, let me get this right, all skin folk and kinfolk. And I think that when we have this conversation is that, yes, we want representation, but we also want people that are competent in that as well, so that they aren't perpetuating the things that are harming us. If you want to burn down the house, you have to have a blueprint for the new one first. And that was just kind of my thoughts that I got from the conversation.
I think Judge Biggers touched on it, because you have a lot of people who enter into law enforcement and they enter in, and when you go to the academy or you go to law school, that doesn't teach you how to love yourself. It gives you this false sense of self. And so when you're amongst all these people who you now consider to be powerful people, you just join whatever violence, or you just join the club and you do what they do because they're doing it. So we need to, I think, before we even talk about the blueprint, we need to talk about how we going to instill this sense of self-worth in these people before they even make decisions to join law enforcement.
And I would also add that, unfortunately, I wouldn't be surprised. I guess these were Tuskegee police officers. He said it was the police, so not the sheriff's department. Mr. Davis, they were police officers, not sheriff deputies.
It was the Tuskegee police that showed up first, and then
right.
the sheriff department.
Well, I can assure you that one of the problems with the Tuskegee Police Department is they have a big turnover. They have a big turnover. The salary is not high, and they probably had not been properly trained. And then, of course, that raises another question of what is proper training for police officers. So I do understand, and I have found more incidents of misbehavior or just incompetence, neglect. It was negligence because they didn't know any better. to occur in the police department more than in the sheriff's department. So I do understand and I feel you. Hopefully that won't happen again.
No, I don't go out to gatherings anymore.
Okay. All right, and Attorney Bryant, I wanted to let you know there is one female district attorney in Alabama. She is Lanice Washington, and she was elected in 2016 as the district attorney, Bessemer cutoff for Jefferson County. So we have another Black female district attorney that you can add to your list.
Okay.
Washington, which I'm proud to say is in Alabama.
Thank you, ma'am. But also too, I want to add on what you said. Police officers are poorly trained. I teach policing at the university. I've been teaching it for 3 years. And the things that I've seen, just incredible in terms of in terms of a lot of these students are only required to obtain an associate's degree. In some jurisdictions, they're not even required to obtain an associate's degree. So you have a young person just out of high school who's now put into the academy where they probably utilize maybe 2 to 3% of what they actually learn in the academy. And you put them out into the street with a gun and a badge and discretion. And in some jurisdictions, immunity. You basically created a monster. And Judge Biggers touched on, training. And I've always been an advocate of additional training. I think an officer should be required to receive or obtain a 4-year degree, because that then gives them more understanding of the world. It gives them time to mature, and it expands in terms of New York, it gives them more exposure to the different cultures and diversities, because they don't teach you anything about culture or diversity in the academy. They teach you how to shoot a gun and write a report. So if you have the wrong person who's not qualified, and here in New York, the psychic portion of the application process can be circumvented. You can go on YouTube and learn how to circumvent the psych portion of the exam, of the application process. So we have, there is, I think Ashante mentioned, we can't burn it yet, but we can really highlight some of the problems that exist in terms of policing in this country. And there are lots of them. And we at this point, we're aware of them. So now the question is, what do we do next? They're talking about defunding the police, and the majority of those people who are talking about defunding the police have no idea of the city budget, how the city budget works, nothing, no knowledge, but they're screaming defund the police. So it takes me back to education. People are not educated about the things that impact them. And that's a part of the problem. And they don't want to take responsibility or commit to educating themselves about these things.
Okay, we have 7 minutes to close us out. Hafiz, can you pick 1 or 2 of the questions that's still in existence and let them have it, please?
Yes, there is another question for Judge Biggers. Like, what resources do we have in the system to address racism with qualified immunity and based prosecutors to impede justices for the victims of systematic racism in the justice system?
You're on mute, Judge Biggers.
Ready to jump down there. Okay. All right. Now, the question is, I'm trying to see if I saw it in the chat. What
recourse do we have? Yeah.
At 437.
I don't see it in the chat.
It says, what recourse do we have in the system to address racism and qualified immunity and biased prosecutors to impede justices for the victim of systemic racism in the justice system?
Okay, what resource we have right now?
Recourse, yeah.
Oh, recourse, the ballot. Most of your prosecutors, your district attorneys are elected. Since we cannot it looks like Congress is not going to pass anytime soon the George Floyd Policing Act, then we're going to have to pay attention to what our prosecutors are doing. We're going to have to pay attention to what our judges are doing. Here in Alabama, all our prosecutors are elected officials. And most of the time they run unopposed when they should not be running unopposed. They should have opposition. But that goes to education, we gotta vote. We gotta vote them out. The same thing for police chiefs who are appointed. We got to put pressure on the municipal governments where police officers, if they are not performing properly, then we have to change the head, the police chief or the mayors. So right now, since there's no legislation to assist in this process, then we're going to have to use the ballot box.
Here's the problem. And I know we got to go, but here's the problem. We have 4 minutes left. You all have brought so much to us tonight. So much stuff tonight. But here's the problem. Apparently, the only time people of color come out to vote is in presidential elections. There has to be a strategy to teach from the ground level the importance of the ballot box. And I was driving through Jackson, Mississippi on my way to visit my mom, and as I'm driving through, I see Medgar Evers Highway. I said, "Oh man, look at that!" I see Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner. I said, "Oh man, look at this!" I mean, all of the names is in front of us, but there's no causal relationship. There's no connection between what that meant then and how it impacts now. What was the purpose of these brothers and sisters dying? And so we just, for some reason, I guess I don't really remember any time in my course, Dr. Warren, when I was educated, except in a kind of peripheral way, when that I just came up, I just said, I'm going to vote. I couldn't wait to vote. But it seems like there should be some kind of civic teaching somewhere that educate young children or young people, as I think that's what Charlene Bryant is saying, and that to connect with what you're saying, Judge Biggers, that there should be an educational system and process in place that say, look, you have to vote because if you don't, we're gonna beat you. You need a spanking if you don't vote. Because if these people are running unopposed and they continue to do with impunity what they've done from yet. Listen, I'm getting frustrated. Dr. Warren, it's your turn. So Dr. Attorney Bryant and Judge Biggers, thank you so much. But before you go, Dr. Warren, Hafiz, thank you so much. We give him much love to our brother. He is the first, before he became, the same time he became an exchange student from Pakistan, he also became a bioethics honor student. And he is very invested in the program and trying every chance he gets to come to my office about what else can he do. So we're very, very appreciative and proud. And so therefore I was glad that Attorney Bryant brought up the Quran for Assalamu Alaikum for their brother, because we all represent the same God. Now, over to Dr. Warren. Please give I can't say anything else without using bad words. So Dr. Warren, you close it out. Blessings upon you, sir.
I think the presenters closed it out. I would only say women, leadership, and ethics. It's a prime example of what that means. I am overwhelmed with trying to reflect on the depth and breadth of their comments. And it set forth for me what we have to do. And I'm just, again, pleased to have listened, and hopefully I heard some of what was being said. So again, I think we have had a wonderful first day, and I'm looking forward to continuing. Let me do as I did earlier in our other session, is say to both presenters that we can't pay you for what you've contributed. What we can, in a vote of appreciation, we've had some special coins developed by a Reverend Leonard Tuskegee that represents something we think is the highest honor. It's a coin, a silver coin, a gold coin of Booker T. Washington. You can't get these coins any place but here. And so we want to present the gold coin to our keynoter and the silver coin to our responder. We'll get these to you, but it's an example of our appreciation for who you are and what you do. So I can't thank you enough, and look forward to you further engaging with us throughout the rest of the week.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure